In Greenwood Park, an elderly woman found herself in a terrifying situation when two aggressive police officers, Richards and Collins, approached her for no reason. Before she could explain, they unjustly accused her, forcibly threw her to the ground, and handcuffed her. The frail woman, clearly shaken and scared, attracted the attention of several park-goers, though most were hesitant to intervene. In the midst of the injustice taking place, Mike Tyson, the legendary former boxer, happened to be at the park. What happens next will make you compromisable. Stay tuned to witness how courage and compassion can turn the tide against injustice. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share where you are watching in the comments. Your support will help us bring more meaningful stories like this. Mike Tyson, the legendary former heavyweight champion, was enjoying a peaceful afternoon walk in Greenwood Park when his attention was drawn to a commotion near a stone bench. His sharp eyes quickly identified the source of the chaos. Two police officers, Richards and Collins, were loudly confronting an elderly woman who appeared frail and helpless. The officers accused her of wrongdoing, their voices rising in anger, and without giving her a chance to explain, they forcibly grabbed her arm, causing her to lose her balance and tumble to the ground. The sight deeply unsettled Tyson, evoking painful memories of injustice from his own past. As the officers continued to treat the woman with undue aggression, Mike decided he could not remain a passive bystander. Aware of his influence and moral responsibility, he approached the scene with determination. His calm, yet commanding presence caught the attention of both the officers and the gathering crowd. Mike firmly confronted the officers, questioning their actions and demanding that they release the elderly woman. Despite receiving threats to back away, Mike stood his ground, positioning himself between the officers and the woman as a shield of protection. His voice, steady and resolute, echoed the values of justice and compassion, sending a powerful message not only to the officers but also to the onlookers. It was clear Mike Tyson was ready to fight for what was right, regardless of the consequences. Mike Tyson, determined to stand against the injustice he had witnessed, approached the two officers, Richards and Collins, with a resolute expression. The elderly woman, now trembling on the ground with her hands cuffed, glanced at him with eyes filled with both fear and hope. Mike's presence exuded calm authority as he stepped forward and firmly addressed the officers. "What are you doing?" Mike demanded, his voice steady but loud enough for the small crowd that had gathered to hear. "She's just sitting on a bench. Is this what justice looks like to you?" Officer Richards, visibly annoyed, turned to face Mike. "This isn't your business. Move along unless you want to get in trouble," he sneered, attempting to dismiss the interference. Collins smirked, adding, "You don't even know who she is. Why do you care?" But Mike wasn't deterred. He took another step closer, his eyes narrowing. "It doesn't matter who she is. She's an elderly woman, and you're treating her like a criminal without any explanation. That's not enforcing the law, it's abusing your power," he said, his voice growing firmer with each word. The officers exchanged glances, clearly trying to maintain their composure, but the growing attention from the crowd was making them uneasy. Richards, attempting to regain control, threatened, "You're obstructing law enforcement. Leave now or we'll have to take you in too." Mike stood his ground, crossing his arms. "Take me in? For what? For standing up to you when you're clearly in the wrong?" he retorted, his calm demeanor masking his rising anger. "You're supposed to protect people, not harass them. Look around. Everyone here sees what you're doing." The crowd, emboldened by Mike's courage, began murmuring and pulling out their phones to record. Some quietly chanted, "Let her go," while others called out, "Stop this abuse of power." The officers started shifting uneasily, their confidence wavering under the weight of the growing scrutiny. Collins, still attempting to assert dominance, took a step toward Mike, his voice sharp. "You think being famous makes you untouchable? Don't push your luck." Mike tilted his head slightly, his gaze unwavering. Who I am doesn't matter right now. What matters is that you're crossing a line the whole world is watching. If you don't want this to spiral out of control, do the right thing. Let her go." The tension between them hung in the air. Richards glanced at the crowd, now growing larger and louder. Collins, noticing the shift, muttered to Richards, "Maybe we should back off." But Richards wasn't ready to concede yet, hissing, "We can't let them think we're weak." Mike took another step forward, placing himself directly between the officers and the woman. "Weakness isn't admitting when you are wrong," he said, his deep voice cutting through the noise. "Weakness is doubling down on injustice to protect your ego." The officers, now visibly uneasy, hesitated as the crowd erupted into louder calls for justice. Mike remained steadfast, a towering figure of courage and compassion, as the balance of power began to shift against the two officers. The confrontation marked a pivotal moment, one where Mike's unyielding stance turned the tide in favor of justice. As Mike Tyson stood resolutely between the elderly woman and the two officers, Richards and Collins, the onlookers in Greenwood Park began to take notice. Initially, the small crowd had hesitated, unsure of how to react. Most people kept their distance, reluctant to get involved in what appeared to be an intense confrontation. But as Mike continued to challenge the officers with calm authority, something shifted. His determination emboldened the witnesses, and a sense of collective responsibility began to take hold among the growing crowd. One by one, people pulled out their phones to record the incident. The scene was tense. An elderly woman sat trembling on the ground, handcuffed and surrounded by two police officers who were being openly confronted by one of the most recognizable figures in the world. Murmurs of discontent rippled through the park as more bystanders stopped to watch. A middle-aged man in a baseball cap whispered to his wife, "That's Mike Tyson. He's standing up for her." The realization spread quickly, and with it came a surge of courage. A young woman stepped forward slightly, holding her phone high. "This isn't right," she said, loudly enough for others to hear. "They're abusing their power." Her words sparked a wave of agreement among the crowd. Others began echoing her sentiment, their voices growing louder and more unified. "Let her go!" someone shouted from the back of the crowd. Another voice joined in, then another. Soon, a rhythmic chant emerged. "Let her go! Let her go!" The officers, who had previously carried themselves with arrogance, now looked increasingly uncomfortable as the chant gained momentum. Richards turned to Collins, his voice low but tense. "This is getting out of hand," he muttered. Collins, trying to maintain his composure, hissed back, "Just stay calm. They'll back off eventually." But it was clear they were losing control of the situation. The crowd continued to swell, with more people joining as word spread about what was happening. A group of teenagers on bikes stopped to watch, their phones out to capture the scene. One of them exclaimed, "That's Mike Tyson! He's protecting the old lady!" The buzz of recognition only added to the crowd's energy. Among the onlookers, voices of outrage and solidarity began to rise. An elderly woman in the crowd, her voice shaky but determined, called out, "We're not afraid of you. This isn't justice. This is abuse of power." Her words were met with cheers and applause. A man in his 30s stepped forward slightly, pointing at the officers. "We've had enough of this. You're supposed to serve and protect, not intimidate and abuse." The officers, now visibly uneasy, tried to regain control. Collins raised his voice, shouting, "Back off! All of you are obstructing us from doing our job. If you don't leave now, we'll arrest you for causing a disturbance." But his threats only fueled the crowd's anger. "Go ahead and try," someone shouted defiantly. "You can't arrest all of us." The crowd erupted into cheers, their unity growing stronger with every passing moment. A young woman near the front of the crowd pointed her phone directly at the officers and said loudly, "Everything you're doing is being recorded. This is going viral and you can't stop it." Richards shifted uncomfortably, glancing nervously at the phones pointed in his direction. "Maybe we should," he started, but Collins cut him off. "No, we can't back down now. It'll make us look weak." Amid the escalating tension, Mike Tyson remained calm but resolute. He turned to face the crowd, raising a hand to quiet their chants. "Thank you all for standing up," he said, his deep voice carrying over the noise. "This isn't just about her. It's about all of us. Let's make sure they know we won't stand for this kind of behavior." The crowd roared in approval, their cheers echoing through the park. Encouraged by Mike's leadership, more people stepped forward to voice their support. "You're a hero, Mike," someone shouted. Another chimed in, "We're with you." The officers, now surrounded by a wall of recording phones and unwavering public outrage, began to falter. Their once confident demeanor had eroded under the weight of public scrutiny. Richards glanced around nervously, while Collins clenched his jaw in frustration. As the crowd continued to chant and film, the balance of power had clearly shifted. What had started as a single man standing up for justice had grown into a collective movement, with dozens of voices demanding accountability. It was no longer just Mike Tyson standing against the officers. It was the entire community. As the confrontation in Greenwood Park escalated, the sound of approaching sirens pierced the tense air, drawing the attention of both the crowd and the officers. Moments later, a patrol car pulled up and a middle-aged man with a commanding presence stepped out. Lieutenant Taylor, a senior officer, known for his no-nonsense approach, scanned the scene with a sharp gaze. He immediately noticed the elderly woman on the ground, handcuffed and visibly shaken, as well as the growing crowd that was recording the incident. Walking briskly toward Officers Richards and Collins, he demanded an explanation. "What's going on here?" Taylor's authoritative tone silenced the murmur of the crowd. Richards stepped forward, looking relieved at the arrival of his superior. "Sir, we're apprehending a suspect, but this man," he gestured at Mike Tyson, "is obstructing and inciting the crowd." Mike, calm but assertive, interrupted. "That's not true. These officers assaulted this woman without cause. She was just sitting on the bench and they attacked her without any explanation." Lieutenant Taylor turned to Richards and Collins, his expression stern. "Do you have any evidence or a report to justify your actions?" The two officers hesitated, stammering excuses. Their silence spoke volumes. Taylor's voice grew colder. "Instinct isn't evidence. Release her immediately. I'll handle this." The crowd erupted in cheers as justice began to prevail. Lieutenant Taylor, visibly displeased with the actions of his subordinates, stood in the center of the growing crowd. He turned to Richards and Collins, his sharp tone cutting through the tension. "Remove the handcuffs immediately," he ordered. The officers hesitated, their faces betraying a mix of frustration and embarrassment, but they ultimately complied. Richards reluctantly stepped forward and unlocked the handcuffs, freeing the elderly woman who sat trembling on the ground. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause, their chants of justice echoing through the park. The lieutenant knelt beside the elderly woman, his expression softening as he addressed her. "Ma'am, I am deeply sorry for what you've been through. This is not how we serve or protect, and I assure you that this matter will be thoroughly investigated," he said, his voice steady and sincere. The woman, tears streaming down her face, nodded weakly, still shaken but comforted by his words. Turning to Mike Tyson, Taylor extended his hand in gratitude. "Mr. Tyson, thank you for stepping in. Your courage and composure prevented this situation from escalating further. I'll ensure that these officers are held accountable for their actions." Mike shook Taylor's hand, his expression serious. "It's not about me. It's about making sure things like this don't happen again," he replied firmly, glancing at the officers. "People need to feel protected, not afraid." Taylor nodded, acknowledging the weight of Mike's words. Addressing the crowd, he raised his voice to ensure everyone could hear. To everyone here, I understand your frustration and outrage. What happened today is unacceptable and does not reflect the values of this department. I promise to take immediate action to hold these officers accountable and ensure such behavior is not tolerated. As the crowd began to disperse, their faith in justice slightly restored, Taylor turned back to Richards and Collins. His tone grew cold and authoritative. We'll discuss your conduct at the station. Prepare for a full investigation. The officers lowered their heads, realizing the gravity of their actions. Meanwhile, Mike Tyson helped the elderly woman to her feet, ensuring she was safe before leading her to a nearby bench. Though the immediate crisis had ended, the event left a lasting impression on all who witnessed it, serving as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up against injustice. As the immediate tension in Greenwood Park began to ease, Mike Tyson turned to face the crowd, which had grown significantly during the confrontation. People were still recording, their phones raised high, and the air was filled with a mix of cheers, murmurs, and a lingering sense of outrage. Standing tall, Mike raised his hand to quiet the crowd. His powerful presence commanded attention, and the murmurs gradually subsided. In a deep, steady voice, Mike began, "What happened here today is something we've all seen far too often, an abuse of power against someone who couldn't defend themselves. But today, we didn't stay silent. Today, we stood together, and because of that, justice had a chance to prevail." He paused, scanning the faces of the crowd, ensuring his words resonated with everyone present. "I don't know this woman," he continued, motioning to the elderly lady who was now seated safely on a bench. "But I know she didn't deserve to be treated like this. No one does. And if we hadn't been here, if none of us had spoken up, this could have ended very differently." The crowd murmured in agreement, some nodding solemnly. A young man shouted, "We need more people like you, Mike." Mike acknowledged the comment with a slight nod, but quickly refocused on his message. "This isn't about me," he said firmly. "It's about all of us. It's about our responsibility as a community to protect each other. We can't keep turning a blind eye when we see wrong being done. If we do nothing, we're letting it continue. But when we stand together, we can create real change." Mike's tone grew more impassioned as he spoke. The police is supposed to be here to serve and protect us, but when some officers abuse their power, it destroys trust, not just in them, but in the entire system, and that's why we can't stay silent. We need to hold them accountable, not just for this woman's sake, but for everyone who's ever been treated unfairly. The crowd erupted into applause, with some shouting words of encouragement. Mike raised his hand again, urging calm, and continued, "This isn't just about Greenwood Park. It's about every community, every neighborhood where people feel powerless to stand up for themselves. That's why we can't let today be just another story. This has to be a turning point." A young woman in the crowd held up her phone and yelled, "We're with you, Mike. Keep fighting." Mike smiled slightly, then grew serious again. "I'm not the only one fighting. Each of you here today has shown that you care, that you're willing to stand up for what's right, and that's how we win, not as individuals, but as a united community." He took a moment to look around, ensuring his words had settled in. "Today, we saw how quickly things can go wrong, but we also saw how quickly we can come together to make them right. Let's not stop here. Let's keep pushing for accountability, for fairness, for justice, not just for this woman, but for everyone who's ever felt powerless." The crowd erupted into cheers once more, this time louder and more unified. Applause filled the air, and a chant of "Justice! Justice!" broke out. Mike let the moment linger, then raised his hand one final time. "Thank you all for being here today," he concluded. "Let this be a reminder that we're stronger together, If we keep standing up for what's right, we can make a difference, not just today, but every day." With that, the crowd cheered louder than ever, their unity and resolve strengthened. Mike turned to help the elderly woman once again, ensuring her safety, as the echoes of his words lingered, a powerful call to action against injustice. In the hours following the confrontation in Greenwood Park, videos of the incident began circulating across social media platforms. Dozens of witnesses had recorded the scene, capturing the moment Mike Tyson courageously stepped in to defend an elderly woman from mistreatment by two police officers. The videos highlighted the officers' aggressive behavior and Mike's unwavering stand for justice. Within a short time, hashtags such as Justice in the Park, Mike Tyson Hero, and End Police Abuse started trending, and the footage quickly went viral. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of users shared the videos, expressing their outrage at the officers' actions and admiration for Mike Tyson's intervention. Comments flooded platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, with many praising Tyson for his bravery and condemning the officers for their excessive use of force. "Mike Tyson is a real-life hero," one user tweeted, while another wrote, "How many times does this need to happen before we see real change? Enough is enough." News outlets quickly picked up the story, broadcasting the viral videos and providing detailed coverage of the incident. Interviews with park witnesses, as well as clips of Mike Tyson's powerful statements to the crowd, dominated the headlines. The elderly woman, identified as Mrs. Martha Johnson, became a symbol of vulnerability and resilience. The story struck a chord with people across the country, reigniting conversations about police accountability and systemic reform. As the videos continued to spread, the Greenwood Police Department faced intense scrutiny. Calls for transparency and accountability poured in from the public, advocacy groups, and even local politicians. This incident is a stark reminder that unchecked power leads to injustice, a prominent civil rights activist stated during a televised interview. It's time for real, actionable reform. The pressure on the police department mounted as the videos garnered millions of views. People organized small protests outside the Greenwood police station, holding signs with messages like "Protect, don't abuse" and "Justice for Mrs. Johnson." Online petitions demanding the immediate suspension of officers Richards and Collins gained tens of thousands of signatures within hours. The department, already struggling with its public image, was forced to respond swiftly. In an official statement, they announced that both officers had been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. However, this initial response did little to quell public anger. The viral videos had made it clear that the officers' actions were part of a larger issue within the department. Critics demanded not only individual accountability, but also systemic changes to prevent such incidents in the future. Mike Tyson, now hailed as a champion of justice, used the momentum to amplify his message. In interviews and social media posts, he called for unity and action. "This isn't just about one incident," Tyson wrote on his Twitter account. "It's about making sure no one else has to go through what Mrs. Johnson experienced. We all have a role to play in creating a fairer, safer society." The viral nature of the incident proved to be a turning point. It galvanized a community that had long felt unheard and sparked a broader movement for reform. While the immediate outrage was directed at the officers involved, the event also shed light on the need for systemic accountability. For many, the incident became a powerful reminder of the impact of collective action and the importance of standing up for justice, no matter the odds. Following the viral spread of the Greenwood Park incident, an independent investigation was launched to examine the actions of officers Richards and Collins. Led by an external committee to ensure transparency, the investigation delved into their conduct during the confrontation with Mrs. Martha Johnson and uncovered a troubling history of abuse. Records revealed that the two officers had faced multiple complaints in the past, ranging from excessive use of force to unprofessional behavior. However, these complaints had often been dismissed or ignored by the department, allowing their misconduct to continue unchecked. The investigation relied heavily on the footage captured by witnesses in the park. The videos, which clearly showed Richards and Collins forcibly handling the elderly woman without justification, were analyzed alongside witness testimonies. Statements from Mrs. Johnson and Mike Tyson, who had intervened, provided further evidence of the officers' excessive actions and lack of cause for the arrest. It became evident that their behavior not only violated department policies, but also eroded public trust in law enforcement. As the investigation progressed, public pressure on the Greenwood Police Department intensified. Advocacy groups, community leaders, and concerned citizens demanded accountability, calling for immediate disciplinary action against Richards and Collins. Small but vocal protests outside the police station featured signs reading, "Justice for Mrs. Johnson," and "End Police Brutality." The department faced mounting criticism for its previous failure to address complaints against the two officers. After weeks of thorough examination, the independent committee concluded that Richards and Collins had acted in violation of both professional ethics and legal standards. The report highlighted their abuse of power, lack of evidence for Mrs. Johnson's arrest, and history of similar complaints. In response, the Greenwood Police Department announced the immediate dismissal of both officers. Their termination was described as a necessary step toward restoring public confidence and ensuring accountability within the force. Lieutenant Taylor, who had intervened during the incident, addressed the community in a public statement. "The actions of Officers Richards and Collins were unacceptable and do not reflect the values of our department," he said. "Their dismissal is a step toward justice, but we must do more to ensure incidents like this never happen again." The case served as a wake-up call for the department, prompting broader discussions about systemic reforms and the need for stricter oversight of officer conduct. While the dismissal of Richards and Collins marked a significant victory for justice, the community vowed to remain vigilant, ensuring that this moment would lead to lasting change in how law enforcement interacts with the public. After his heroic intervention in Greenwood Park, Mike Tyson transformed into a passionate advocate for police reform. Recognizing the profound impact of the incident and the systemic issues it highlighted, he channeled his influence and energy into a movement aimed at restoring public trust in law enforcement. For Mike, standing up for Mrs. Martha Johnson was not just a singular act of courage, but a call to action, a chance to spark meaningful change in communities that had long struggled with injustice and abuse of power. Mike's advocacy journey began with a powerful speech at a community rally held days after the incident. Standing before a crowd of hundreds, he shared his perspective on what happened in the park, linking it to larger issues of systemic abuse and inequality. "I stood up that day because I couldn't stand by and watch someone suffer," he said. "But this isn't about one day or one person. It's about changing the system so that no one else has to endure what Mrs. Johnson went through." The rally was the first of many public appearances where Mike spoke candidly about the need for reform. Drawing from his personal experiences with discrimination and injustice during his youth, he connected deeply with audiences. "I've been on the other side of power," he often said, "where people judge you not for who you are, but for what they think you are. I know how it feels to be powerless." Social media became a key tool in Mike's advocacy efforts. His personal accounts, already followed by millions, became platforms for spreading awareness about police accountability and systemic reform. He regularly posted updates about the Greenwood Park incident, shared stories of others who had faced similar injustices, and encouraged his followers to get involved in their communities. One of his most viral posts read, "Justice isn't just about punishing the guilty. It's about protecting the innocent. Let's make sure no one gets overlooked." Mike also collaborated with civil rights organizations and community groups, lending his voice to amplify their efforts. He partnered with national advocacy groups like the NAACP and local grassroots organizations to host events and discussions aimed at bridging the gap between law enforcement and the communities they serve. These events often included forums where citizens could voice their concerns and propose solutions directly to local officials and police representatives. Understanding that individual accountability was only part of the solution, Mike pushed for broader systemic reforms. He called for mandatory body cameras for all officers, independent oversight committees to investigate misconduct, and comprehensive de-escalation training for law enforcement. "It's not enough to fire a few bad apples," he said at a town hall meeting. "We need to change the whole orchard." Mike also emphasized the importance of rebuilding trust between police and communities, particularly those that have historically faced discrimination. He championed community policing programs that focus on collaboration and mutual respect. Police officers shouldn't just show up when something's wrong, he said. They should be part of the community, listening, helping, and building relationships. As Mike's advocacy gained momentum, his role extended beyond speaking engagements. He began organizing workshops aimed at educating both citizens and officers about their rights and responsibilities. He also participated in campaigns to recruit more diverse police officers and promote transparency within law enforcement agencies. One of his most impactful initiatives was the establishment of the Justice in Action program, which focused on mentoring young people in underserved communities. Through this program, Mike sought to inspire the next generation to become leaders who champion fairness and equality. "Change starts with education," he often said. "If we teach our kids about respect and justice now, they'll carry those values into the future." Throughout his advocacy work, Mike maintained a close relationship with Mrs. Martha Johnson, the elderly woman he had defended in Greenwood Park. Together, they appeared at several events, sharing their story to inspire others. Mrs. Johnson often described Mike as her hero, but he always deflected the praise, saying, "I'm just a man who did what needed to be done. The real heroes are the people who keep fighting for change every day." Their story became a symbol of resilience and unity. Mrs. Johnson's recovery, both physical and emotional, was supported by the community, which rallied around her. She often spoke alongside Mike, urging people to remain vigilant against abuse and advocating for reforms that protect the vulnerable. Mike's efforts were not without challenges. Some critics accused him of overstepping or sensationalizing the issue. Others questioned his qualifications to lead a movement for reform. But Mike met these criticisms with humility and determination. "I'm not an expert," he acknowledged in an interview. "I'm just someone who cares deeply about justice. I'm here to learn, to listen, and to do my part." He also faced pushback from some within law enforcement who felt his advocacy painted police in a negative light. To address this, Mike made it clear that his fight was against abuse of power, not the police as a whole. "Most officers are good people doing a hard job," he said during a press conference. "But when someone in the system abuses their authority, it hurts everyone, including the good officers." Over time, Mike's efforts began to yield tangible results. His advocacy contributed to the adoption of several key reforms in Greenwood's police department, including the implementation of body cameras, mandatory de-escalation training, and the establishment of an independent oversight board. Community policing initiatives were also expanded, creating more opportunities for dialogue and collaboration between officers and residents. Nationally, Mike's work inspired similar movements in other cities. His story became a catalyst for broader conversations about police reform and the role of community leadership in driving change. Activists and leaders often cited his intervention as proof that one person's courage can ignite a larger movement. Even as progress was made, Mike remained focused on the ongoing nature of the fight for justice. He continued to attend community meetings, speak at rallies, and mentor young leaders. "This isn't a sprint," he reminded his supporters. "It's a marathon. We've taken some important steps, but there's still a long way to go." For Mike Tyson, the Greenwood Park incident was more than a single moment of heroism. It was the beginning of a lifelong mission to ensure fairness and equality for all. His transformation from a legendary boxer to a powerful advocate for justice demonstrated that true strength lies not only in physical power, but in the courage to stand up for what is right, no matter the odds. His journey inspired countless others to join the fight, proving that collective action can create meaningful change in the face of systemic injustice. In the aftermath of the Greenwood Park incident, the local police department faced mounting public pressure to address the systemic issues highlighted by the abuse of power displayed by Officers Richards and Collins. Recognizing the urgent need for change, department leaders, led by Lieutenant Taylor, implemented a series of comprehensive reforms aimed at restoring public trust and fostering accountability within the force. One of the first changes introduced was the establishment of an independent oversight committee. Comprising community leaders, legal experts, and retired law enforcement officers, this committee was tasked with investigating complaints against police officers. Unlike internal reviews, these investigations were designed to be transparent and impartial, ensuring that misconduct allegations were addressed fairly and promptly. Transparency is key to rebuilding trust, Taylor stated during a public meeting. We must show our community that accountability is not just a promise, but a practice. Mandatory use of body cameras was another significant reform. Officers were required to wear the devices during all interactions with the public, with footage automatically reviewed during investigations of complaints. This measure aimed to provide an objective account of events and protect both citizens and officers from false accusations. To further bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community, the department launched new community engagement programs. Officers were encouraged to participate in regular meetings with residents, held at schools, churches, and community centers. These forums provided a platform for open dialogue, allowing citizens to voice concerns, ask questions, and share their experiences directly with law enforcement representatives. The goal was to foster mutual understanding and create a sense of shared responsibility for public safety. Additionally, the department revamped its training programs to emphasize de-escalation techniques and cultural sensitivity. Officers underwent workshops focused on communication skills, conflict resolution, and understanding the diverse communities they served. These programs aimed to equip officers with the tools to handle tense situations calmly and effectively, reducing the likelihood of unnecessary force. As part of the reforms, the department also introduced a whistleblower protection policy to encourage officers to report instances of misconduct without fear of retaliation. Accountability starts from within, Taylor emphasized. Officers need to feel safe calling out wrongdoing when they see it, knowing that their voices will be heard and valued. The reforms extended beyond internal policies to include collaborative community initiatives. Programs like Coffee with a Cop and neighborhood patrols were introduced to foster positive interactions between officers and residents. These initiatives aim to humanize law enforcement and build trust through everyday connections rather than crisis-driven encounters. The impact of these measures was evident in the months that followed. Residents reported feeling more comfortable engaging with officers, and complaints of misconduct began to decline. Community members, once skeptical of the department's intentions, acknowledged the positive changes, though many emphasized the importance of sustaining these efforts. Reform isn't a one-time fix. A local activist noted during a town hall, "It's a continuous process, and we'll be watching closely to ensure it stays on track." While challenges remained, the Greenwood Police Department's commitment to transparency, accountability, and community engagement marked a turning point in its relationship with the public. The incident that had initially fractured trust became a catalyst for meaningful change, setting a precedent for other departments nationwide. By taking concrete steps to address systemic flaws, the department not only began to rebuild its reputation, but also demonstrated the power of listening to and working with the community to create a safer and fairer society. Mrs. Martha Johnson, the elderly woman at the center of the Greenwood Park incident, emerged as a powerful symbol of resilience and justice in the aftermath of her ordeal. Initially a victim of unwarranted aggression, she transformed into a voice of hope and determination, inspiring others to stand against injustice. With the support of the community and the encouragement of Mike Tyson, who had intervened on her behalf, Mrs. Johnson found the strength to share her story publicly. At rallies, community meetings, and public forums, Mrs. Johnson recounted the events of that day, describing not only the fear and humiliation she experienced, but also the profound gratitude she felt for those who stood by her. "I thought no one would help me," she often said, her voice steady but emotional, "but Mike Tyson and all of you gave me hope that we can create a better, fairer world." Her courage to speak out resonated deeply with audiences. She became a face for those who had experienced similar injustices, but lacked the platform or opportunity to voice their struggles. Standing beside Mike Tyson at numerous events, Mrs. Johnson emphasized the importance of community solidarity and accountability in addressing systemic issues. Mrs. Johnson's story reminded people that even the most vulnerable among us can be a catalyst for change. Her resilience inspired others to confront abuse of power, making her not just a victim, but a key figure in the movement for justice and reform. The Greenwood Park incident became a powerful symbol of the transformative impact of community action and individual courage. It showed how a single moment of bravery, like Mike Tyson's intervention, could rally people together to confront injustice. What began as an act of abuse against an elderly woman turned into a unifying event that inspired collective action. Witnesses in the park, emboldened by Mike's stance, joined forces to demand accountability, creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond the scene. The story reminded people of their shared responsibility to stand up against wrongdoing, especially in the face of systemic abuse. It underscored the importance of speaking out and taking action, even when the odds seem overwhelming. The incident also highlighted the strength that emerges when communities come together, amplifying the voices of those who are often ignored. Ultimately, the event became a beacon of hope, proving that change is possible when individuals and communities refuse to remain silent. It served as a reminder that courage, unity, and persistence are essential in the fight for justice. Mike Tyson, renowned for his legendary boxing career, has emerged as a powerful symbol of justice and fairness beyond the ring. His intervention in Greenwood Park, where he stood against the abuse of power to protect an elderly woman, showcased his courage and deep commitment to doing what is right. This pivotal moment marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life as an advocate for change. Using his global influence, Mike became a voice for the vulnerable, speaking out against injustice and promoting systemic reforms. His advocacy extended beyond individual acts of bravery, as he worked tirelessly to rebuild trust between communities and law enforcement. By participating in rallies, mentoring young leaders, and championing accountability, he inspired countless others to stand up for what is right. Mike Tyson's transformation from champion athlete to champion of justice reflects his unwavering belief in fairness, unity, and the power of collective action. His legacy now stands as a testament to the impact of courage and compassion in creating a better society. The story of Greenwood Park concludes with a powerful message of hope and a rallying call to action. It reminds us that standing up for justice is not just the responsibility of a few, but a collective duty for everyone. Mike Tyson's courageous act and the community's unwavering support demonstrated the profound impact of unity and determination in the face of injustice. This is a call to each of us, to speak out when we witness wrongdoing, to support the vulnerable, and to hold those in power accountable. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it begins with small, decisive actions, moments where we choose courage over complacency. Let this story inspire you to take a stand in your own community. Join hands with others to fight for fairness, dignity, and equality. Together, we can create a world where justice is not just an ideal, but a reality for all. The time to act is now, because every voice matters and every action counts. If this story touches your heart, please share to spread this positive message to more people. Don't forget to press the subscribe button on our channel so you don't miss out on more inspiring and meaningful life stories. Let's create change together, starting today.